Hey, folks, welcome to this episode of JamesPod. Today, this afternoon, I have a special guest, Matt Royer. He is past president of the Virginia Young Democrats, former campaign manager to Ibrahim Samira. And as Matt, we talked about before, I was an Irene Shin fan, so no offense there. I came to know you and have come to know you from the social media world, but I've been following your Substack by the ballot. And so let me just throw that up here on the screen so folks can see it, and I'll put it in the show notes. I would encourage anybody interested in, especially the quote, younger people's viewpoint. You've got a lot of content on there, and I've just been spending the last few days kind of reviewing it. Great work. It sounds like you're really interested in Virginia politics. So really appreciate you coming on, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate your invite.
Yeah, and so Matt, the reason I wanted to talk to you, we're obviously in a very interesting time, and so let me first of all ask you, what was your motivation for starting the Substack?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in, working in politics for almost a decade now, and I've been involved in not only just professionally, but also in the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party of Virginia. And what I was noticing was there's a lot of folks coming out of the 2024 presidential election, and they were saying, what we did wrong or what we missed. And I felt like a lot of it was getting either too in the weeds on some of the issues or was just missing the point completely. And that was really when I wanted to, get in and look at what are the issues affecting, younger folks, especially young men. That has been a huge thing that I have been looking at. And also, just media and how we work in this media space. I'm not, a journalist. I'm not saying that I'm a reporter or anything like that, but I am, a political professional. And, the Substack space kind of gives you that ability to voice your opinions on some of these things. And, what I say in my bio is, I don't think I have all the answers, but, I have experience. So I want to be able to lend my experience to help other folks out, kind of navigate this world.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I will tell. So I'm 42. I think I'm a millennial. What would you qualify yourself as? I don't know.
I'm a millennial. I'm 31 right now, so
31.
I'm at the tail end of the millennial right into Gen Z.
Okay, I will tell you, and I'm starting to see Substacks more. And you had a funny intro post about essentially not another damn Substack, but I'll be honest with you, I grew up on podcasts. I think that was new for the generation before me. Substack is new to me. Tell me about how is it useful? How are younger people using it? Do you think that it's becoming more and more important?
So one of the things that I really noticed with our media environment in general is just that we're lacking in long form content. Really, a lot of things are getting, you can't really talk about stuff in 280 characters. There's no nuance. Everyone's, this is like something that I in a future piece that I'm going to be talking about as well, is like we are always trying to find the perfect words, which is along the lines of the issue that I had with the third way memo that just came out saying that there are all these words and phrases that Democrats should never use. And to me, I'm like, that's not the issue. The issue is we're trying to talk about really complex issues and problems in a really confined space. And that we can't work out those problems through that kind of microblogging. So really, what I'm seeing right now is that we're seeing a lot more of long form content where you can get all that out. And also within Substack, there are, different media that you can go through. Like you can have your, I do voiceovers for all of my pieces so that people can hear me read it rather than just reading it themselves. Because I know myself, like I like to do other things while I'm also listening to either podcasts or articles. So that's something that is accessible because it's on there. So And then other people like to do videos. There's a lot of folks who are pivoting more into away from legacy media and more into this new Substack kind of digital first content, because the issue is a lot of these larger news stations are still beholden to corporations, and that's why you see people like Jim Acosta, Terry Moran, like all these, or Don Lemon for that matter, like all these former anchors for large media companies going independent, because they can finally say and focus on things the way that they want to, rather than just be beholden to whoever was telling them what they should be focusing on.
Sure. And we'll get into podcasting and the quote manosphere in a bit, but you did raise an issue. I was curious about Andrew Schultz. I'll tell you, I knew him before he was a podcaster, more from the comedy world. I know a lot of those guys from the comedy world. They've obviously become essentially political thought leaders, apparently. And I will say, to their credit, Schultz does have some interesting thoughts. And one of the things that he mentioned was, he said it in a joking way, but he said, for what Trump is and was and will be, build the wall and all that, frankly, bullshit. He said, look, we know it's bullshit, but it was simple to understand. And frankly, we think Democrats should be doing more of the bullshit, at least say something, even if it's not going to happen, which would be kind of antithetical to this long form. I mean, do you think that we need to get more Trumpian in a way, in certain sense? Is Newsom doing it right, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, I think it's a little bit more complicated than just simplifying. I mean, for me, what I want people to do is just talk like a human being, right? Like, that's basically it. Like, most of the issues that we're seeing are, folks are either speaking too academically, and that's not like relatable and not accessible to the common person. So that's why we have like this perception that Democrats are no longer the party of the common person. They are elitist. They are all about overly educated, overly academic speech, which is to a certain degree our own fault. I think, like, we have decided that we need poll testing on everything. We need message testing on everything. We need focus groups. We need all this stuff. And then we turn into these speech bots that seem to be fed all of these buzzwords. And then that's just not something that people can hear and understand. And I think that turns into a huge issue, right? When you're not relatable, people don't want to listen to you. People don't want to go and vote for you. Sure. And, I always think about, it is a very cliche thing, but a lot of times when people look for people who they want to vote for, they want to vote for someone who you can, quote unquote, have a beer with, right? That has been, a way of, they want people to just think that they are for the common person, for the common voter. And when we are not simplifying our speech and doing it in a way that folks can relate to, then you get into that issue. And I think that the other part of that is they do want to see pushback, right? Sure. For like so long, and even the person who said this quote, has said that was foolish. Like, for the longest time, we had that, when they go low, we go high mindset, sure, right? Which is good in theory. Like, yes, you want to be positive, you want to be great, you want to be better and on a different playing field than your opponent. But when you're constantly getting hit over the head with all these insults and you're just pretending like you don't see it, people, see that as being weak because you're not fighting back. And I think that was one of the things that I heard like earlier this year. And, speaking of polls and stuff like that, the highest, the most common word that people related to Democrats was weak. Sure. Because they don't see us pushing back against people. They don't see us get back against people. So, yeah, I think why people are so they're just gravitating to what Newsom is doing is because someone is finally pushing back. Someone's finally saying something that everybody's feeling, which is that this is ridiculous. And I'm just going to start, kind of making fun of them a little bit to see what's going, see how that works.
Yeah. And what I'll say is, number one is it is entertaining to see. I mean, I don't know that that's actually Newsom coming up with those jabs. I guarantee you it's probably some intern that's just funny as hell.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm a Newsom guy. I think that he strikes me as one of those people that has a facade, but then if you know him, I don't, I just have a lot of concerns.
Yeah.
I'm seeing Wes Moore now kind of taking more shots, which I'm more of a Wes Moore guy.
Yeah.
Big Buttigieg fan. I don't know if it's the moment right now, just from a communication standpoint, but I keep on in my mind, keep going back to when Hillary got destroyed because she characterized certain Trump voters as deplorable. All the while, you see guys like Trump and Stephen Miller not only saying we're absurd, it's literally calling us Democrats enemy of the people. I think there was some quote coming from Stephen Miller, like today, categorizing Democrats as like terrorists, essentially, as a whole.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know that we want to go as far as Trump. I never want to be Trump. I never want to be Stephen Miller, but I do appreciate the effort that Newsom is taking. But I do, and I think you can speak to this specifically. There are people on the ground, the technocrats that are doing the jobs, that are working hard, that aren't braggarts, that are not, just trying to make a name for yourself. I find that you probably the same way. The people that speak the loudest are probably usually doing the least work.
Right.
But we were emailing back and forth before we jumped on it. And again, we're going to get to a bunch of stuff if you bear with me.
Yeah.
But you pointed out that I think at least what I took from part of your motivation for starting the Substack, at the end of the day, it's about trying to get people registered to vote.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's winning elections. We can talk all we want, all these Substacks, all these YouTube channels. Do people even care? Are we just essentially just our ego getting to us? Who cares what we think, right? But there was a New York Times article that essentially showed, from a registered voting standpoint, from 2020 to 2024, there's a swing, 2.4 million loss of Democratic voters and an upswing of 2 million or so more registered Republicans. So what 1,000-foot view do you have, and we're getting into it, but do you have, like, what should we be doing differently?
Yeah. To me, it all comes down to, like, what is our message? Like, what are we trying to tell people? Like, for the longest time, and this is something that people who know me, I have beat like over the head with, which is not enough of the time do we give people something to vote for. We're always saying, like, what are you going to vote against? And at least, that's what, like, at least I heard a lot from people, last year with Trump. They're like, well, Trump is, at least he's going to do something, right? Like,
he is.
Yeah. And sure enough, he is doing a lot. But, what they thought from the Democratic standpoint, where they're like, oh, well, Trump is evil, we need to beat him. Like, that's all that they heard. And it might not be what we were saying, but, there is, like, I think that for too long, we've been trying to either say that we're better than them, but we don't really give them reasons why we're better than them. I think, you talk about like Pete Buttigieg on Flagrant, right? Like with Andrew Schultz, like, he was saying, like, this is what I want to do. I want to make sure that, you have a place to live, that the water you drink is clean, that if you want kids, they go to a good school and they're healthy. If you don't want kids, you can have the choice to not have children and have access to birth control. And also, I want to make sure that you can get to work on time and get paid a living wage. And when you say it out like that, everyone's like, oh, yeah, I would totally go for that. But we don't do that because I think what we have done is we've gotten too on the fringes of stuff. Right. We are always battling in the margins. We're never talking about stuff that is relatable to anybody. And this is, for me, what I've said was, there are core issues that relate to everybody.
Mhm.
If you're, no matter who you are, what your identity is, like where you're from, like what your sexual orientation is, what your family life is, there are things that you relate to that will always be applicable, which is, like I said, having a place to live,
Mhm.
having access to clean water, having access to healthcare, having good education for your children, having a good commute to work, without having to worry about traffic or the cost of transportation. Like, these are things, like those 5 things right there are all things that we can relate to no matter who you are. But for the longest time, and this is something that I did say, like in my one piece about why we're losing young men, is we have been so focused on making sure everyone is, paid attention to, which is great. But when we do that, we also sacrifice other things, right? We sacrifice people thinking we're not prioritizing the right stuff. People thinking that we are too focused on other people's needs and not enough on the needs of everybody. And that, in that same poll that I talked about earlier, that said that Democrats are, the most relatable word to them is weak. The other thing is, they said, out of 2 phrases, what do you think that Democrats stand for? And the 2 phrases were that Democrats are for the working class, and Democrats are for the rights of another group other than mine. And they said that for the most part, the people thought that they are for a group that's not someone that they identify with, which honestly is a leading poll, and I understand why. But it does show that there are a lot of folks who are, for instance, in labor unions who are voting Republican. Like, we've seen that with Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters going to the RNC. And people are shocked by that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm really not that shocked, because we've kind of pushed out our blue collar folks and then kind of went for, the higher up elitist sort of celebrity, rather than getting more working class folks who we need to support us. So, those are kind of all things that I see that are lending to that. And, I think that right now, we are, we're seeing a few folks, we're talking about Zoran Mamdani up in New York City, and how he's leaning into the socialist sort of agenda. And I'm like, you know what? That might not play in every single district, and that might not play in rural Missouri or rural Kentucky, but it's going to play in New York City because people are seeing him do all that stuff. So I think that we need to stop being so afraid of these labels that people want to give us, and that kind of allowing Republicans to also hijack that language from us.
Sure. And just democratic socialists, which is very different than socialists.
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
But one of the things when I hear that, though, and I appreciate it, and sometimes, from I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer because I'm not very creative, right? And so I see logical answers like that, where focus on tabletop issues. But then you see what's happening in Virginia right now with Spanberger, with versus Sears, Jones versus Meares, Reed, of course, where they're being very conservative, very tabletop oriented in their campaigns. You cannot in any way characterize, Spanberger as some, democratic socialist, soft on crime, that kind of thing. Then you see one sign by one asshole, and I'm just going to use the language asshole, where this person is at a Democratic rally and puts up a blatantly racist sign. The only reason the media is there in the first place is because Sears is there to talk anti-trans rights about, the one of 10 students in our entire nation that that she just wants to batter. And all of a sudden you see the media just clamoring for, hey, let's make this about bathrooms. When the Democratic Party is trying to focus on, in my view, that too conservatively on tabletop issues. How do you fight that when the ecosystem, the media ecosystem, is so bent on let's allow the MAGA talking points to be what drives the discussions? Because clearly it's clickbait. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have definitely lost control of the media space, and I think that not is like a decades long issue. Like I would say even going back to the Fairness Doctrine all the way back during the Reagan eras, like that is that allowed Rush Limbaugh to take off, who would then lead to like Alex Jones. That allowed like Rupert Murdoch to become Fox News and New York Post and all that. So like this has been something I think that has been building for years, but I don't think people really understood the political kind of influence that it would have down the road. Now, how do we do that right now? One of the things that I have thought and that I've said before is that we are kind of thinking about the wrong thing when it comes to the media environment. Like we're trying to say, we'll just make our own Joe Rogan if Joe Rogan is so popular. And I'm like, that isn't necessarily the way to go. Like we can't just manufacture that kind of base. Like what we need to do is we need to find the people on the left or, that are leaning to the left that already have those bases and go and talk to them and be on them. And I think that for right now, like there are people who are very popular that you can talk about. Like, you look at Kylie Kelsey. She has even said that she's Democratic, like hard leaning to the left on most things. Yeah. Like she has a base of listeners that someone can go to and talk to her, and they can talk about those issues, right? You have, I think about the guys like Stavros Halkias, who are extremely progressive, extremely leftist when it comes to their politics, but they still have folks on, that are, Democrats, and they can talk to them. Like they have that. We can use that platform. We don't have to make a manufactured thing. And that is what I think we continuously kind of get wrong, is that we always try to throw money at the problem. Like if I just spend a little bit more on TV, if I just spend a little bit more on paying these influencers to do this work for me, to make these political influencers, quote unquote, political influencers, as it were. And I don't think that necessarily is right, because it feels astroturfy to me. Like people can see it and they go, I don't like it.
What do you mean by astroturf? I've heard that phrase thrown around in the political world, and I'm not quite. Just it looks fake, but it's
So when you hear about political support, everybody. I don't know where it comes from, but everybody loves to use like grass, like it's grassroots, grass tops.
Okay.
Grassroots are your voters, your activists on the ground. Grass tops would be like your folks who are your community leaders, right? Sure. Like they might not be like a congressperson or like a delegate or a state senator, but they are like in the, people who are at the head of like a local party or something like that, right? So when you get somebody who's astroturfy, it is someone who is presenting as a local activist, but is clearly being paid to be there, is clearly being manufactured an image of I'm just a local guy that doesn't need anything. But you can see right through it, because it is not like this person came out of nowhere and all of a sudden they are agreeing with an opinion that is against what the community is saying, right? I think about it a lot because for the longest time, I used to work in, like local, like grassroots activism for things like, wind farms, like solar farms and public affairs for those kinds of things. And sure enough, people would just prop up out of nowhere who all of a sudden were, wind farm and solar farm experts on why they were bad for the local environment, why they were bad for the community. And you're kind of like, all right, well, this guy is clearly not someone who actually lives here. This is someone who's being paid to be opposition. So, when I think of that, I think of like, yeah, it's great when we want to make a Democratic oriented like YouTube channel, but people see that for what it is, right? People don't go onto YouTube to watch the updates from the DNC or like the updates from like a Democratic Party. Sure. They go on there to like view clips. They go on there to like watch, sports reruns, watch news clips, like whatever. They're not there to subscribe to that. But we should be able to utilize those shows that are on there by going in and just having a conversation with them, fully presenting ourselves for what we're there for, which is to further the Democratic message, further Democratic candidates, get Democratic candidates elected. But we're not presenting this facade of, oh, this is just some, random, podcast that I just started and I'm just going to be talking about how great the Democrats are all the time.
You mean like this one?
No, I mean, I think that like more of these are great, right?
Yeah.
Like you're clearly like that's what like I try to present in my thing, like by the ballot. Like everyone's like, oh, you got like a former like Democrat, like young Democratic like party like president, right? Yeah. Like you got to like clearly he's just gonna. I'm like, no, what I am doing is I'm giving my opinion. This is an opinion piece. I don't speak for anybody but myself. If people want to listen to me, that's great. It's mostly, I'm going to be honest with you, it's mostly I'm just writing down rants that I would be saying to my wife in our house anyway. Yeah. So it is like, I just want to be able to share that insight with people.
Well, and I'll be honest, if anybody has listened to more than one of these episodes of this podcast, I think they will quickly learn that my goal is to just have a therapy session about what the hell is going on in DC and across the state. What the hell do I know? We're just all kind of grasping for how do we understand what is happening in our politics today? What is happening? I will say I got involved in politics, or I always was interested in politics, but from a wonky side. I majored in political science and just like the history of it. Then Trump gets elected and you just looking around seeing what the hell is happening. But then, you had this huge push for criminal justice reform and the blue wave in the state politics. And I realized at the state level, there's a lot of genuine people and you can have a lot of direct impact. And so I don't know what I'm doing either, man. But it's interesting to talk about it.
Yeah.
You mentioned hard left, and I think maybe that'll help me understand, because I still don't really understand. I think Republicans and MAGA specifically would say that anybody that doesn't vote for Trump is hard left.
Right.
They're all socialists. Like, what do you see yourself as? And, what is the utility of, because I'm becoming more and more far left.
Right.
What is the utility with far left? And, are we damaging the product? I mean, tell me what you think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because like, if you ask people what their like spectrum is, everyone's going to have a different answer, I think. And I think that's just the nature of the beast in politics. Like, I would consider myself a more progressive Democrat, right? I don't think that I am a leftist, so to speak. I have a lot of friends who are leftists. I have friends who are in DSA, and I have friends who are, kind of, or they think that either they're just not subscribing to any like party affiliation because they don't think that it works, and I understand that too. But I still believe in the Democratic Party. I still believe that it works. That is why I would consider myself a more progressive Democrat, just because I'm not bucking against the system or anything like that when it comes to party politics. Now, I think that if you look at across the board, there's always going to be like a broad spectrum of ideas. And I do think one thing, that I've always like kind of like just kind of talked about a lot is for some reason, the more that we like don't see the results that we want to, the more that we're going to start punching to the left, which I think is a mistake.
Mhm.
And I think that really happened a lot. It started in 2020, with just folks who were kind of pushing the Bernie camp out of the party,
Mhm.
and it continued on through the next 4 years, which I think that a lot of people felt a little, disengaged with politics in general because they, were getting consistently, for lack of a better term, shit on by the Democratic Party and the people inside. And I think that if we're trying to be smart about it, we should really be embracing those folks because, they are, like I always say, iron sharpens iron, right?
Mhm.
The more that they push people to the left, I think the better that we will be progressively. Now, I think the difference between the more progressive Democratic folks and the leftist folks is leftists have a much larger idea of a drastic holistic approach to change,
Mhm.
whereas people in the Democratic Party are much more incrementalists, I think.
Let me ask
And
you, what
yeah.
would you, to just to orient, you know, that
Mhm.
where would Mamdani fall in that
Yeah.
analysis?
Mamdani, I would say, is definitely like a leftist. I don't
Okay.
think that he is necessarily like in the middle or just a
Mhm.
liberal or just a,
Mhm.
a progressive Democrat. Like I think that he's a leftist because a lot of the things that he's saying are socialist kind of ideas, right?
Mhm.
Free rent, local like community grocery stores, like things like
Mhm.
that. Like that is a socialist approach, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing, right?
Mhm.
I believe that there are things that we should be doing in the United States that
Mhm.
are socialist in nature and can be successful. And I think that one of those things that I've always said has been universal healthcare. Universal healthcare, Medicare for all, whatever it is, that is a socialist thing. That shouldn't be a bad word to say, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Same thing, public education, public safety, like all those things that you pay for with your taxes that you get services for, those are socialist things, right?
Mhm.
If you're talking about getting rid of all the socialist stuff, like that's privatized firefighters, that's
Mhm.
privatized police, that is privatized emergency services, that is privatized education, all these like privatized like transportation and roads, like all of these things that we take for granted in our daily lives are things that fit into that socialist sort of mindset. So I don't think that necessarily, I mean, it obviously is a loaded term because folks see what happens in other countries when
Mhm.
they're considered socialist and they have failed, and that makes sense. But with
Yeah.
what Mamdani is doing, he's, I think, trying to kind of push back on that a little bit and
Mhm.
say, well, I'm just trying to help my community. I'm not trying to push an agenda. I'm trying to better New York City. And I think that that's part of it.
Well, and it's funny, the term socialist, part of me gets annoyed when I hear folks use the term democratic socialist because I'm thinking, why are we giving them the ammunition? But then part of me is like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
Mm-hmm.
If first of all, the reason socialism historically is an issue is the corruption. It's not about the socialism. It's about
Right.
essentially authoritarians and dictators guising it as socialism, but really using it for their own power.
Right.
Um, Things like Trump essentially acquiring 10% of Intel, to
Mm-hmm.
me, is corrupt socialism. In my view, is if our government's goal is not to protect the most vulnerable, and not even the most vulnerable, but not to provide the most basics, human healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
housing, childcare, education, disaster relief, medical research, environmental protection, these huge issues that only the government, that the goal is not to profit,
Mm-mm.
because the government's not supposed to profit, it's to serve the public. You need the government to be able to do these huge things. And if you're serving in public offices and that's not the goal, then why the hell are you there? That's kind of my
Mm-hmm.
view.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm preaching and what the hell I know, but I really what caught my attention for you is you wrote an article. Democratic Party isn't confused about how to reach young men or people in general. It's afraid of change. What's it afraid? Well, first of all, what is the Democratic Party? I think that's the biggest question I had. Everybody's like, the Democrats want to do this. The Democrats. How do you define the Democratic Party?
So for me, I believe that the Democratic Party is a organization that that represents the views of their voting base. And anybody, it's hard to be in Virginia and say like, oh, well, we don't have party registration, right? Other states you have to register. Are you Democrat, Republican, independent, non-affiliated, stuff like that. But I still believe that, the Democratic Party of Virginia represents anybody in Virginia who subscribes to the Democratic Party ideals, who votes Democrat. So that is kind of what I think of. So for me, it's not, the Democratic Party are the people that are working for those folks who are trying to further that agenda for the people who believe in it. So that's really what I think it is.
I mean, I'm on the outside looking in. I've worked with legislatures to try to get statutes passed that I thought were important. I served on the redistricting commission. That was interesting, but I've never worked with a paid consultant except through those things. I'm not in that world. How important is that part? Is that driving like the policies in a large way? I know that money in politics is a huge issue, but is that part of your concern? As we're having people making money off this stuff versus, electeds and people running for office running or choosing priorities.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, as long as we kind of live in this society, everything's going to cost money, right? Yeah. We are both in a, capitalist, economy and also an attention economy. And the thing is, like, we have to capture people's attention. And how do we do that? Well, we have a bunch of people, my day job, right, is in, digital advertising for candidates for Democratic.
So you're actually handling that kind of work now.
Yeah. Okay. So there has been, I'm also like a member of the Association of American Political Consultants, that's a trade association that I'm a part of. So like there are a lot of, what I would say traditional consultants out there, which I believe are what the party's kind of bucking against right now. For me, all I do is like digital ads and like the data behind it. Like I don't really do any of the, message testing, focus groups, like all that stuff. Like what I like to say is like, I'm the tech person. Yeah. That's really what it is. Like, and that's kind of why I wanted to sort of push out that messaging on my own Substack, was to be like, well, I'm not the one driving this, but I can, give my opinion on stuff out there. And if people like it, that's great. If they don't, then, that's fine. Like it's all good. But, for the longest time, I think that there have been people who have had, a lot of influence in these democratic spaces that might not be making the best decisions. And I think that, that's just the nature of being in politics, is like, there's stuff that works, and but it might not work like even next year. Like there has been, I think, a lot of what you would, like the same debate that we're having about congressional members being like 80 to 90 years old. Yeah. That's also true in political consulting as well. Like there are folks who have been around since like Bill Clinton was in office, and they're still making decisions and they're still doing all that. Like, yeah, they have done a lot of great work and it's been helpful in years past, but that mindset from, 1992 is not going to work in, 2025, right? Like that is one of the things that, me being in the digital space is I've always been, and I have another, like I have also written something about this as well, where I have, said that we need to stop buying so much linear TV. Like we have all these people who get up, like the first thing that they want to do is get on broadcast TV. They're like, we need to spend all this money on these ads, be on broadcast TV. It'll be great. I can tell you 36% of people have broadcast television in their homes. 82% of people have streaming and digital, like streaming services in their homes.
Sure. Yeah.
Why would we keep going back to the place where we only have a small percentage of people, where we know that all these people are other places, right? And there's that side, and then there's the other side of it. And I think that there's been a few good pieces on this recently. One of them was on the Substack on data and democracy, about how some of these digital consultants have also taken advantage of the system and profited off of it using like scam packs and things like that. Because unfortunately, no matter what you do, there will always be bad actors.
What is scam packs? I'm not even familiar with what that is.
So scam packs are, whenever you get a text message or like an email from a group, like let's say Blue Freedom for Our Future or something like that. It's like, it is something so innocuous, like you don't even know what this is. And they send it to your phone and they're just like, I just want $5 from you. Or I just want like $10 from you. Like there's an unfortunate trend that people are taking advantage of people's good nature of wanting to help and taking their money, but not using it for anything, right? And that's what we would call the scam packs or something like that. Like the money never actually gets to, or even if it does, like I think, one of the things that they showed in this piece was, 15% of the money raised actually made it to a candidate. The other 85% went into their own coffers. Wow. And like, that's part of the problem, right? And that's what I think when people are talking about getting these consultants out of, that was a big thing that Ken Martin was saying when he was running for DNC chair. He's like, I want to get the DNC out of DC. I want to get consultants out of the all of the decision making. And I think it's like, for what I can tell, it's like that kind of stuff. Like people who are clearly not working in the best interest of the mission, and they are only doing it to make more money. And I also think that there are a lot of folks who sell out to private equity with these companies as well, and private equity buys up the people who are either doing the consulting or they're doing they buy up the tools, and then all of a sudden you are no longer just beholden to your mission of getting people elected. You're also beholden to, for people who go and get public, they go public on the stock exchange, like then you have stakeholders, you have people that you have to answer to there. You have a holding company that you have to answer to. So that is kind of the issue that we're seeing here.
I wasn't even aware that was an issue at all. I mean, this is things on the back end so you're saying that there are consulting companies being bought up by private equity, and we all know what happens when private equity gets involved. All that matters is profit.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Exactly. Yeah. So, it's an unfortunate side effect of, I understand people need to get paid. Like that is true.
Yeah,
like there's no money. There's no money in just volunteering your time and your effort to get people elected. Like, that's why like we've had so many debates on whether or not Democratic state party chairs should be paid, or whether, other like leadership in the Democratic Party should be paid. And honestly, I've always thought that they should, because they are dedicating a ton of time and effort to this. And the fact that, we have folks who are doing the good work and should be compensated for that is something that I believe. But then unfortunately, like we've said with other stuff, like there's always going to be people who are taking advantage of the system. And it's unfortunate that that is part of it. But I think that, you know, the more that we kind of find the good people who do that good work and we are rewarding them for doing so, the better that we are for it. And the better that our Democratic Party politics can, you know, come out the other side on that.
Sure. And I have no problem. If you're adding value, getting paid, in my view, it's the American way. There's nothing wrong with it so long as you're doing good faith work.
Exactly.
You said Democratic Party isn't confused about reach of young people or people in general. It's afraid of change. What is it afraid of? What is the change that you think needs to be done?
You know, it's difficult to really put it on one thing, but you know, I definitely have, you know, having come from the youth organizing wing of the party, right? There are a lot of folks who are very supportive of young people being in the area and being there. There does come a generational divide in that, you know, right now, like millennial and Gen Z voters make up the largest voting bloc in the Democratic Party. They're like something like, we just reached like 35% or something like that.
I wasn't aware of that. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like we are the largest voting bloc. But what I have noticed, and Garrett Redling, who I wrote this with, noticed, was there are a lot of young people who get brought into these spaces that are just saying whatever it is that the older generations are also saying, just to agree with them. And that was sort of what I was focused on there, was like, we have a lot of issues that, you know, there was a lot of people, I have to say, you know, having been on the, you know, been a part of this movement, was like when we were pushing for student debt relief, when Biden was in office, there was a lot of people who I would say would be more established in the party and in Democratic politics who were really upset by it. And I was like, why? You know, we have all these people who are in enormous amounts of debt. Why would it be an issue? And they just didn't see it as that's not an issue that we should be focusing on. Like, that's something that is a niche issue that is not going to be. But we were showing that, like, even people outside of our generation were saying that this was an issue that they were running into. So I kind of was shocked by that. You know, eventually, you know, with everything, people came around to it, and, you know, Biden was able to, you know, before getting blocked by the courts and getting blocked by Congress on it, like, he was at least able to start doing something. But the pushback that we got from internally, I think, was a little bit shocking to us. But it also kind of reminds you of the fact that, you know, when we're talking about older folks in office, when we're talking about the people who are at the head of this party, they, you know, I would say I kind of want to remove the current leadership from the DNC in this, because they have been doing some good work with holding up young people and making it more accessible for young people. But I would say in years past, especially, you know, when we had, you know, like, we have older folks in the Senate who are still holding on. We have, you know, like, we're running into issues all the time with older folks in Congress and people who are just, like, kind of holding on to that power. We are not uplifting enough people into those leadership positions that we should, who are younger. And I think that one of the things that we saw was, you know, if we saw earlier this year, you know, there was a lot of people who were talking about, like, David Hogg and Malcolm Kenyatta, and kind of pushing back on them and saying that they weren't elected in a duly elected election, or duly elected people through like an election that was fair. So they had to redo it, and that forced David Hogg to kind of step down, and Malcolm had to go through a whole thing. And I think we've seen that as like continuing, like all these people who don't want to support Zoran Mamdani, even though he won a primary. You see it in like the Minnesota DFL with Omar Fata, who won a endorsement vote, and they just stripped it from him because a lot of people thought it wasn't a fair vote and he shouldn't be the nominee. But time and time again, it's all these younger, more diverse folks who are bearing the brunt of that issue. And it's like, yeah, it feels like you want us to be a part of the conversation, but at the same time, it is like you're still wanting to do it the same way you've always done it. And I think that's something that we lose out to the Republicans on a lot, is that we don't really push our younger folks up enough.
I mean, so I think what they would say is, look, number one, there's institutional knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. There's value in seniority when it comes to voting power and all that kind of stuff. And it's not that we don't like Mamdani because of his age. We don't like him because he's too far left.
Right.
What's your thoughts on that? And, and obviously the elephant in the room is Biden, but also Trump too. I mean, they've got well, I guess they're now letting relatively young people, these crazies, run shop. But what about that? What about the pushback that, look, we know what we're doing. We've been here for longer. We should be driving the train.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like discount institutional knowledge and everything like that. Like, I think that, like, if there's people who are tenured and they're doing good work, like, I don't think that people should just be pushed out because of their age either way, like one way or the other. I think that what we see when we see like our, like right now, one of the things that I would say is like big, like on this is, Gen Z and millennials, and I would say mostly Gen Z, are much more supportive of labor unions than any other generation before them. And I would say that shows a shift to the left with younger folks. And I think that the younger people are, it's just the nature of the environment that they were brought up in. And that is why we are seeing people who are, 35 and younger are going to be more progressive. Now there's an interesting kind of backlash to that, where there is a lot of younger men now who are more conservative, and there's a whole other debate around that in general. But I think that it's natural for younger folks to be more progressive. And I think that is a little bit of why it's kind of, maybe it's causation, maybe it's correlation, but there's a little bit of that where you see younger people getting pushed out because they're too progressive or not pragmatic enough, is something that I get a lot. Like, you want people who are the pragmatic progressive is what people are always saying.
Well, so, they want some abstract centrist that's going to appeal to everybody. And, having seen how this Trump politic works, there is nobody, in my view, that's centrist enough to ever make them happy. No. But I keep thinking, I'm a huge fan. I'm a lawyer. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a hero of mine. I think Biden did amazing things. There's questionable things in his younger years, but this last go around, I think he was a great president. Part of, I think, what I would like to be seeing from senior leadership is a recognition that at some point that these jobs are not yours. This is not your office, that you are part of a body that you have to recognize. You've got to hand over the realm, because the younger leaders need the experience, and then expect them to hand it over as well. Because, there's an energy I think that's needed in these jobs, from a stress level, from a physicality level, from a mental acuity level, that when you're, and I'm a trial lawyer, I'm 42. I hope that I can practice healthily through my 60s and 70s, but I don't know physically if I'll be able to do it. I hope to God I can. But I know at some point I'm just not going to be as sharp as I am now. And to be clear, there are 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds are probably sharper than me. I'm not discounting that. I guess what I'm asking for anybody in senior leadership that's watching this, to be thinking about our concerns about not only our futures, we're starting to have kids, and I'm worried about their futures. And at some point, just like I need them to go off to college and then create for themselves, at some point they're going to have to take the realm and the will and lead our country. So I get what you're saying. Now, part of your article was really interesting. You pointed out this and kind of segueing into a little bit different conversation, this Speaking with American Men project. Okay. And I guess this is led by, this was partly started up by Elise Hogue. And to be fair to her, it looks like very accomplished pro-choice advocate, did great work. But it looks like there's like $20 million going into focus groups for like what young white dudes are feeling, right? and not in a disrespectful way. Again, right. I don't mean to be flippant, but I think even Republicans made fun of kind of this study. And you made a point, and you brought up an interesting race out of North Carolina where, look, we got destroyed on the congressional level, but on the state level, you pointed out there was a young leader there. Talk about, and I had her name listed here, and I can't find it on my notes.
Yeah, Anderson Clayton.
Yeah, Anderson Clayton, 25 years old. Talk about that. Yeah.
So the way, so the reason why I think wrote that piece in general was we were talking about I don't understand why you need to spend $20 million. We're here. We could tell you if you asked us, how it, what we see. I have friends of mine that are like I said, are extremely leftist. I have friends of mine who are conservative and Trump voters. I know where people are getting their information from. I know what they say to me when they're talking about some of these, the Democratic politics stuff. I don't think you need to have $20 million to spend to figure it out. Right. And the with Anderson, she is the youngest chair in America, the youngest Democratic Party chair. And she did it not because of her identity, not because of her age, but because she was able to build up a coalition of people who believed in her message. And that was that she just wanted to, make sure that Democrats were successful in North Carolina. That was basically it. She comes from a very rural area. She comes from a rural area in North Carolina that, people don't expect Democrats to run and win in, but people were running and winning there. Right. Yeah. She was showing that we can give a authentic message and get out there and talk to these people if we get people that they know and trust to tell them what these things are. And that was really, what I was saying was we don't that kind of getting back to another point that I had earlier is we're always thinking that there's this silver bullet strategy that we just have not found yet. That there is a right combination of words that we can say that will all of a sudden unlock the doors and everyone will vote Democratic, right? There is a person out there, a perfect candidate that we haven't found yet who we can put up there and everyone's going to vote for them. But that just is never going to happen, right? That we're chasing ghosts when we're thinking of going for something out there that is the best thing that we can get. And I think that with this, with what Anderson has done in North Carolina is even though we lost on the federal level and even though Trump took North Carolina, they still got a Democratic governor, a Democratic lieutenant governor, a Democratic, attorney general, with Jeff, like all these people who are there, who are like doing good work as Democrats because they were able to get that message out and they were able to talk to people and be like, you know, that there was a lot of folks who said, well, I'll vote for Trump, but I'll vote for Josh Stein for governor, you know, and I think that they were able to get that message out that I don't know that the Harris Walz campaign really did, because they were reliant on these surrogates and these paid influencers to get that message out. And I think that that's sort of what we were getting into there is like, we have people in all of these communities and all in the Democratic Party that can be those stewards of that message. And we should be empowering them to do so. And that's why I think, you know, one of the things that I said in there was, you know, it was incredibly frustrating during the DNC that we gave so much time to these former, you know, former Trump staffers and former Republicans. And we didn't give any time to the people doing the work. Like we didn't give time. Like quite frankly, I was confused why we didn't have, you know, Anderson up there talking about how she was was the youngest Democratic Party chair in a state that is a battleground state. Like we're just not doing that. And that I think is a part of the problem is that we are relying on the wrong messengers to deliver a convoluted message that people can't understand. And I think that once we get back to the basics and once we allow people to be those community surrogates, if you will, for those messages, I think that we will see a lot more success in the future.
Yeah, and so your Substack linked to a Politico article about the $20 million, you know, it's called SAM project and speaking with American men, and really again, what it was is expensive focus groups. That's really what it is. Yeah. But they did have some interesting statements which aligned with what you're talking about, Democrats being seen as weak and all that. But I thought this was interesting. It kind of goes along with what you were just saying. Another Latino, and this is a quote from the article, another Latino man from Las Vegas said that during the 2024 campaign, Harris focused on, quote, oh, I got Beyonce on stage with me. Oh, I got Lady Gaga on stage, which I'm a fan of Lady Gaga. I'm not hating on her. And it just felt like, what does this have to do with me? I'm trying here to move up in life. Trump's over here like, if we're able to get a surplus in our budget, we're going to have no tax on tips, no overtime. It's going to take a while to get to that point, but at least he's got saying things that, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And I think that's what you're hitting at is like, and I was honestly watching the DNC and watching the concerts and T-Pain and all that stuff. It gave me this short shot of adrenaline, like, hell, maybe despite Biden dropping out, maybe we have a chance here. But then when I look back at it now, I realize how manufactured that was. Like we were trying to convince the American public that that Kamala was popular, which she was. Don't get me wrong. You know, I think the reality is Biden just waited too long. We didn't have time for a primary, so there wasn't an authentic way to get there. And that's exactly what you're saying. But I think that makes sense. One question I do have though is, should the goal be to try to win over these voters that look at Democrats as weak, maybe even Trump voters, or should we just be trying to expand our base? Should we try to get more millennials out, more college voters out? You know, in the age-old question of forget them and focus on us, or do we need to bring people to the table from the center? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, you know, you brought up the Beyonce thing, right? You know, I one of the most like annoying, but I would say most impactful things that I heard was like someone was like, well, Beyonce doesn't pay my bills, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is so annoying to hear, but it is so accurate. Like, yeah, like we can get all these people, we can do all this stuff and we can make it flashy, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, what are we doing? And I think that, you know, I thought personally, I knew why Kamala Harris was a great candidate. I thought she would be a great candidate when when she was my choice back in 2019 when she was running for
I didn't
president.
know that. Okay.
Yeah, when she was running for president the first time, like I was all in. Like I didn't need to be convinced. But I understood, like, yes, it will take some convincing, and some people need to hear that.
Mayor Pete. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like I already knew that. However, I think that, yes, I think that the things that where we lose are the places that, the people that we don't get out, the people who we don't talk to, the people that don't feel like their voice counts. I think that that's where we really lose out, because if you see when we have turnout, when we have, last year we had one of the highest turnouts ever in Virginia, and Virginia went blue, right? We had one of the highest turnouts back in, 2019, and Virginia, we had the first Democratic trifecta ever, in 30 years, right? Then when we kind of laid off the gas a little bit and didn't talk to people in 21, and we didn't go to those same places, and we didn't go into rural communities, we didn't go into Black communities down in Hampton Roads, and we didn't talk to the people that should be voting for us, they stayed home and they didn't vote. And then we lost by 1.8%. So I think that we should be focused on getting those people off, for lack of a better term, off the bench, right? And get them into, into wanting to vote for us. Because when we give people a reason to vote for us, then we are more successful, right? Because we're always playing this politics of fear, right? Fear of the other side, fear of what they're going to do. No matter, in what I'll say is, I have been tweeting out all of these things that were said during the campaign last year that are coming to fruition. Like, it doesn't matter how correct we are or how right we are in what we're saying, if we're not giving a reason to do something, right? Because I, personally, I have been really frustrated with hearing, well, both sides are the same. It doesn't matter who I vote for. Everything's going to be the same. And honestly, I as annoying as I find that, and as frustrating as that is, I can understand, because they don't know what we're doing to help them. And I think that was one of the, a big criticism of the past administration that, I don't think that they did enough of, which was communicating their wins to people, right? Like, so many people didn't know all of these things that Biden was doing to help them. Like, for some reason, the way that was communicated out was just pushed down by all of this other stuff that we were having to chase around and fight back against, and talk about this issue and this issue and this issue. We weren't able to talk about the good things that we were doing. And even when we did, it was sort of crowded out by all the other bullshit that Republicans were talking about, right?
Yeah, I do worry, though, because that all makes absolute sense. But one thing that Trump and MAGA, Stephen Miller, all those good guys are great at is convincing the public that democracy, and let's be true, democracy is bullshit. It's not actually a democracy. Democrats are not democratic. This is not a republic. It's all corrupted. The only way that you get any semblance of peace is by voting for us. I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. They're treating elections as if they're all rigged, no matter what. And I think, and I honestly have to fight against it, because sometimes I find myself, just from a visceral standpoint, thinking there's nothing I can do. It's all the same. And why am I wasting all this energy? And part of me, even when I was preparing for this interview with you, I'm like, why am I not just focusing on making money and taking care of my kid and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
How do we, and I keep asking the same question, right? How do you drown that out? I mean, I guess it gets back to, we need more avenues of information, our own authentic voices. I mean, I think that's what we're getting with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's basically it. Like, it is a simple, not a, I wouldn't say simplified, but a more authentic way of speaking to each other about the issues that matter most to us. Yeah. I don't think that it's like I said, it's not some ethereal, like, it's not going to be like this vision that comes to someone one day and they're like, oh, I finally got it. I got the answer. It's because we're not doing this. It's like, no, it is just talking like human beings to each other like this, honestly. Like, this is part of it. I think what I said to you earlier is I think that we get a lot more out of, kind of just conversational, talking with one another than anything else. Like, yeah, we can have everything be polished and be edited and do all that. And it will sound good, but is it really something that is going to like resonate with somebody? Right. Yeah. And that is part of it, right? It's like, we're just not relating to people. We're not resonating. Our message is not resonating with people. And we need to get back to that.
Let me ask you this, because, and this is, we've mentioned it before, and it's obviously becoming an issue. And I don't know what the answer, I have my own thoughts, but it is what the Republicans are trying to make this race about. We're talking about the economy. They're talking about trans rights.
Yeah.
How would you focus the message on that? Because, what about the Democrats? If you're like, we're not talking about that, we're talking about the economy. Mm-hmm. But then the folks from the Democratic Party saying, well, you can't leave the vulnerable just out in the cold. How do you address that when you're talking to your conservative buddy and they're like, well, I moved because I don't want my daughter to have to play with boys. Mm-hmm. That's a disrespectful way to say it. Right. How do you address that?
I mean, like, for me, it's like, one thing that I always bring up is like, I don't understand why we're more concerned about where kids are using the bathroom than like, why aren't there enough books on the shelves? Why aren't there not enough teachers that are being able to be out there and teach? Like, why aren't we paying teachers enough money to like educate these kids? Like, why? What does that have to do with anything?
I would say, is a straw man or standing in for them, they would say that education nowadays is more about cultural issues than it is education itself. They're not teaching about math and science, and obviously this is not true. But they're not teaching about math and science. They're teaching about DEI and different forms of gender and things like that. How do I convince them otherwise, or should I even waste my time?
I mean, like, talking to teachers, right? They said, if I had the kind of influence over these students that they think that I do, or that they say that I do, I would be able to get all of my kids to have 100% on every test that they take. Mm-hmm. I would get them to be able to bring a pencil to class. I would get them to pay attention when they're like, doing things in everyday life at school, like not, putting other people, like running down the halls, not, doing stuff like that. If I had that kind of influence, it would make my job a lot easier, but I don't. I think that, I understand, like, yes, safety in schools is a great point. Mm-hmm. However, we have more of a debate over kids and where they go to the bathroom than we do about guns in schools. Let's be honest, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Like, that is just something that is pushed under the rug every single time. I don't, for me, I believe what I tell folks is like, this is all just a distraction, like 100%. Mm-hmm. Like, it is just a distraction from what they are already going to do. And honestly, for folks that, for people, if this is their number one issue, if this is their number one issue that they have, they were never going to vote for a Democrat to begin with. And I think that that's really what we need to be. We need to be kind of being a little bit honest with ourselves. It's like, if you're
and I'm going to,
no, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead. I'm going to throw up. No, go ahead. Sorry, go. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just said, like, if someone is going to the ballot box and they're saying like, well, what did they say about trans kids in schools? Then like, and they don't want, if the answer is that I support trans kids, and if they, if that's how they identify, then I want them to be safe, and I want them to be in the place that they are, that they identify with. And if they're not okay with that, then they were never going to vote Democratic to begin with. So like, if you change your mind and all of a sudden you say, well, actually, I don't think that they should, and I think that trans kids should be, be in the biological the bathroom with their biological sex at birth, and that person still doesn't vote for you, then you just conceded ground on something for nothing. And I think that is what we need to understand, is like, we, as much as they want to center this and make this the issue, right? We can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? We can focus on the economy while also, being supportive of trans rights. We can focus on healthcare while also being supportive of our immigrant population and not wanting them to be deported. But we don't have to focus on their framing, which is just playing to people's worst instincts. And that's all they're going to do. So that is kind of where I'm at with that.
And I'm going to throw up a quick, really interesting opinion piece and see if it is from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. It was the author, Scott Bass, August 24. So this is just 2 days ago. And this was a really, really interesting article, op-ed by Scott, about how Sears is essentially trying to turn this into, a referendum on trans rights, as opposed to what she and Governor Youngkin has allowed to happen to our Virginia economy. But I'm quoting his op-ed, and let's be honest, this war was never about protecting girls from, quote, biological males invading their locker rooms. And he links to an article: fewer than 10 trans girls were even permitted to play on girls' teams in Virginia from 2020 to 2024, according to the Virginia High School League. And earlier this year, the VHSL reversed its policy. Trans girls are no longer allowed to switch teams. And, for me, that kind of hit home about what we're talking about. We talk about government efficiency, DOGE, and all that kind of stuff. I can tell you, I've got a 3.5-year-old. I've got a 3-month-old or 4-month-old now. What scares me at night for my daughters is not whether or not they happen to have a trans teammate on their swim team or on their soccer team. What scares me as a parent is the culture that this new MAGA world presents for young men, and about how it is to be a man in their relationship to young women, to where you are supposed to be the dominant. You're supposed to be the one with the opinion. I've even seen, high up leaders talking about how women should not even have the vote, and men should essentially be able to vote for the household. What scares me is the open discussion about minimizing women as we go forward. And I don't ever want my daughters to have to face something like that. And implicit in that, and I'm not saying obviously that, men from that culture are violent or sexual and overtly sexual, but there is undertones that scare me there too. And I hear Sears talking about parents' choice.
Yeah.
Well, what about the choice for parents like me?
Yeah.
I don't know, Matt, do you have kids? Yeah.
I do not have kids. I plan on having kids, but I do not have kids right now.
It changes you, and not in a way, I hear a lot of J.D. Vance talking about, childless cat ladies, and it's almost like using as a cudgel. I'm a parent. You can't understand what I'm going through. Right. When I talk about being a parent, it comes from a place of fear. I now have more fears than I ever had, that I ever thought I would have. When I didn't have kids, if I got put in jail, if I lost my job, if I died in a crash, obviously I don't want those things to happen. It was me, right? And yeah, I don't want my family to be sad, but now I know that I have people young girls depending on me going forward. And just the abuse, the cynical nature of this argument that Sears and Miaris is making, it just pisses me off.
Right.
And I know I brought you on to bring you on to help me understand, but I'm just telling you as a dad, it pisses me off to no end. So
no, I totally understand. And I understand that completely. Like I don't have kids of my own, obviously. But
you're allowed to speak. And by the way, I have young nephews. Like I have one nephew who is 5 or turning 5, and I have another one who's 4, and I have another one who's 2. And I think about that on the other side, right? I think about how young and impressionable they will be when they get older, and how people can kind of take advantage of that and kind of spur them into the wrong way. Because I see it all the time. I see younger guys who are all of a sudden like they are on this anti-women, anti-feminist warpath that I just don't understand. But I have read a lot on things like there's a great book, it's called Black Pill. It's by a CNN reporter who did a really good job on it, and it makes sense because the way that they get to young men is through humor, right? They say something that is funny. They say something that is like, oh yeah, I could totally relate to that. And then they kind of get in that way, and all of a sudden it just escalates and escalates and escalates and escalates and escalates. Then all of a sudden you have kids who are at school now who are doing a Nazi salute because they think it's funny. Right. And they don't understand the harm that comes with that. And I think that one of the things, that I said in my piece about young men is like, when they are younger, right, when they're in like that impressionable age of like in their teenage years or younger, we have had a habit of jumping down their throats when they do something wrong. And what they have is a kind of this feedback loop of, well, the guys on the internet said, yeah, they're going to do that. They're going to yell at you and they're going to say how wrong you are, but just know that you're right. And they have that in their minds of people are going to get mad. And it's the same thing like that. I have, I studied intelligence analysis in college, and I had a whole course on like religious terrorism and like cults and like apocalypticism. And the thing is that by getting angry with these guys when they're young, you are actually creating more just stronger extremists, because they have a leader who is telling them that people are going to be angry with them. They're going to yell at them. They're going to say all this stuff. And they're just trying to take away your success. They're just trying to take away your opportunity from your life and from your ability to be a success and to have a family and to do all these things. And you can't let them. And it's something that you go back to like, the 80s and 90s when people were talking about welfare, and they're talking about the new civil rights bill in the 1990s, when they're saying like, well, this is just the DEI thing is just to get a quota of people of color and women in the workplace, and they're just going to take your job away. And then you just got to live with it because you're not, progressive enough. But that's not the case, right? It's not like they're not taking your opportunity away just because they are, just because they want someone else to be successful. Like, your success is not dependent upon whether or not someone else is successful. It is fully dependent upon your work ethic, right? And I think that when we start off with kids who are young like that, and we, with unfettered access to the internet, right? And they hear all this stuff, and then they have that reinforcement at school of, well, they're doing and saying exactly what they said that they would, so I must be right, and the people I'm listening to on the internet must be right. And that is scary, right? You can't
you can't get to everybody. You can't get in front of everybody, and you can't kind of counteract that. And there's like, everybody says, well, you can't really put that genie back in the bottle, but you can do it, I believe, with and that's what I said in that piece, is with positive, like masculinity and positive, like men in their lives. And I think that we have a lot of that on the left and in the Democratic Party. And we've just been kind of afraid of being like, that overly masculine kind of way, just because it's been so toxic.
Well, and I'm old enough now I remember when I was, 15, 16, going on 20, that kind of thing. And I don't know about you. I was awkward. I didn't know how to talk to the opposite sex. And so, and I had 3 older brothers that were very, I'm a small dude. Like they were very, manly guys. Like you look like you could kick my butt too. And so, as a young guy, I remember trying to find my footing to figure out what it means to be a man. And I remember thinking and, listening at that point to gangster rap and stuff like that. I mean, you hear, you hear things that were said back then. I listen to music that I listened to back then. I'm like, Jesus, this stuff is what was happening,
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed the most that I listened to it. So I in a lot of ways, and young men growing up have faced things that my generation, even your generation, didn't have to face with social media capturing every single thing you do. You then have COVID coming out. Now you've even got situations where, AI may be taking people's jobs.
Yeah.
The huge change. And, you used to be able to make a good living, buy a house. Is that even possible now? Is it even possible to afford having children? So there's all these social pressures. And then I get it. I mean, you hear, I'm a minority and I'm all for raising up minorities. When I started in Fairfax Courthouse, all the judges were white men and all the staff were minorities. And I didn't think that was right. But on the flip side, you hear young white guys saying, well, what about me? And I understand that. Like they've got to feed their families too. So it's not an easy thing, but just the way that I see, a guy like JD Vance or Stephen Miller telling me what it is to be a man. Are you
right?
If that is the guy that, Andrew Tate, it really, I mean, when you can see, especially guys like, because I think a guy like Andrew Tate, I think is kind of epitomizes like what I, at least in my mind, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but what I think conservative men of that ilk look at. They see a guy that's fit, good looking, he's articulate, can communicate well, he appears to make money. Obviously, he's been accused of very, very, horrible things. And regardless of that, he's an asshole.
Right.
The way he talks about women, any conservative guy watching this, if you've made it this long, that is not the way to get a woman that you want.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you. Here's my suggestion: learn how to ask them questions about what interests them. It's that simple, and then believe in yourself.
I mean, it is that easy. Just having a conversation with somebody. I think
and sometimes they're not going to like you. If you get turned down, move on. That's life. I mean, I'm not Brad Pitt here. I mean, what are we doing? Like careers, sometimes you're not gonna, you're gonna get turned down from jobs. You're gonna get turned down from girls and, whatever you like. I don't really give a shit about that kind of stuff, but it scares me the way that I see guys like JD Vance, even Trump, posting these weird memes like him shirtless and six pack. It's like, what is just bizarre stuff.
Yeah. It is a very toxic environment, and it is very weird. And I think, if you want to talk about like something that really resonated like last year, is like, like when Governor Walz was saying like these Republicans are just weird, right? Like that is something that was really like, they are like, that's just what they are. Like, it's weird and it doesn't make any sense, but it unfortunately does get to that like kind of immature way of thinking about masculinity. right? It is not what I would say it is a teenage boy's vision of what they should be. Like, and I know, like, we've all been there. Like, we were all like, we were all teenagers. We all thought, oh, the way that I get girls is I just really need to, get really, really strong and be really, really good at sports, and everything will come to me and it'll be fine. And for some people that worked. I wouldn't say that is JD Vance or Trump. When I'm looking at them, I don't think that they're the most athletic people in the world, but it is a immature way of looking at things. And unfortunately, that is what we are seeing now.
Yeah. And again, I have this discussion again, not to mock young men. In fact, I empathize with many of them. I feel bad for many, just like I think that minorities are vulnerable group. I think a lot of people, Stephen Miller says reversed racism. He's an asshole and he's racist, but a group of young men, they are in a position it's difficult to be in now. I understand that. And I don't even necessarily, of course I'm not, there are just some assholes, right?
But what I think, I think is they're mad at the wrong people. Right.
And what I was going to say,
I
don't blame them. I blame the leadership, especially political leadership that is taking advantage of them.
Exactly.
That's what pisses me off.
Yeah. The thought process that I need to be nice to billionaires now, because when I'm a billionaire one day, people will be nice to me and that'll be great. It's like, no, you're never going to be a billionaire. Like, that's not gonna happen. And if it does, that is great, right? Yeah. It is that idea that there are, I mean, that is what, like, the aristocracy, like, that is the elitist people do, is they want people on the bottom to just be fighting against each other so that they get mad at each other all the time. It is like out of the fascist playbook, right? It is somehow these people are both the most conniving, most powerful people in the world in this group, whether that is women, whether that is minorities, whether that is trans people, like whatever. And they're also subhuman and weak, right? They're both so powerful they can take over your life and make your life a living hell, but they also are lesser than you and also are too weak to put up a fight. So, like, you're constantly giving that information to these young guys, and they're always thinking that, and they somehow need to navigate through that world of how can I let these people be in charge of me? I'm supposed to be better than them. Yeah. But they're never going to let you be, like, the people giving you that information are never going to let you be in their club. Like, they're never going to want you to be around them.
And what I would say is, number one, we don't know. Like, I'm not having this conversation with you as if I know all, be all, and all that. And I don't know what being a man is. I don't know. I'm the furthest from a masculine man. Okay. I don't also have a problem with, if your goal is to become a billionaire, if that is your goal, that's great for you. If you succeed, great for you. I just want you to be the kind of billionaire that once you succeed because of your own gifts, but because of the gifts of God or whatever, because we don't all get that. We don't get there just by ourselves, to then say, I've got $1 billion. What am I going to do with that? Am I going to use that to beat down even further on the downtrodden, or am I going to use that to help people that are more vulnerable? I think that, in the past generations, and this is a loaded term, but like it used to be the quiet guy that wasn't the loudest, but was there to protect the smallest. That was the guy that you wanted to be.
Right.
The guy that would open doors for people, not shoving people down. That's the kind of values that we really admired. I mean, the quiet soldier, right? That we know he's been through some shit, but he doesn't need to brag about it. But he'll be back on that line if you need him on that line. And I don't know where we've lost that and how we've come to admire a guy like Trump, who's the opposite of all of that.
Yeah.
So
I went to an all boys Catholic school growing up. And we were always taught through the Jesuit way of things, which was we would always have men for others, right? It was never, whatever you did in life, it wasn't about yourself. It was about what you could do for your community, what you could do for your family, what you could do for the, greater good. And I have always thought that, and that's why I got involved in politics in the first place, right? Was I have a mantra of leaving something better than you found it, right? Even if it's a small change, even if it is this like a minuscule better than when you left it, when you found it, then you've done your job. And yeah, there has been this shift, I would say, over the past 15 or so years, that you need to do whatever you can to get ahead. You need to do whatever you can to get a leg up on other people, because that is American and that is the way that you should do things. I definitely think that there are a lot of folks who are taking advantage of people's need to be more successful, their need to provide for their families, and they are kind of playing to that, like their worst, like people's worst instincts, that it's someone else's fault that I'm in the position that I am in. I need to blame them for it. And in some cases, sure, there are factors of people who have been put in positions because of someone else's decisions, but it is not because of the people who are also suffering with you, right? It is because of these people at the top who don't want you to be as successful as they are. And, I think about all those people who are like, so what if Trump scammed people? So what if he took all these money from people? They're just losers, and they deserve to be taken advantage of. And that kind of message is really dangerous, because that is how you get these strong men into the places that they are, because you think that that's how they should be. And yeah, I like you said, I don't think that I know everything. I don't think that I know what the right things are, but what I want to be able to do in positions that I am in is to give that, voice of reason, maybe voice of, positivity for these guys who look up to, people like me, people like you, people in positions that are being facing forward and trying to make the world a little bit better, so that they know that that is an option that they have. Like, they don't need to just be successful at the expense of someone else. They can be successful helping other people. And whether it is, there's so many different schools of thought on this, whether it's capitalism, whether it's, just the American way, or whatever it is. And I don't know what all the reasons are. I like to think that I know a few of them, and I try to voice my opinions on them, but it is something that we need to wrestle with, not just as a political party, not just as, an individual group of people, but I think just as a society. We are seeing a lot of violence and a lot of hateful rhetoric out there that is just sort of being looked over and excused. And I think that, if we continue to just say that that's okay, then yeah, you're going to get more JD Vances. You're going to get more Stephen Millers out there. Like, that's just how it is, and I think that, I myself, when I was a teenage kid, I said stupid stuff all the time, but I didn't have people cheering me on about it. I had, parents and teachers and folks who were saying, hey, let's think about what that means. Why is that a harmful thing to say? And then you learn from that. But now, like, we are so afraid of holding kids accountable like that, and holding them to a higher standard that, we don't give them that guidance. And I think that's part of it as well.
Well, and I think about it when I was that age and I heard, insensitive language and just absurd things. That was from rappers. That was from dumb movies. That was not from the political leadership, our thought leaders, that was mainstream. That I'm really concerned about what Trump and that ilk of politic is telling us what it is to be a good person, to be a good man, and all that stuff. I mean, it's hard to look across the aisle and not be terrified. And look, I am not saying that every person that votes for Trump is Trump or believes in all that bullshit. What scares me, though, is they can see that bullshit and not speak out and say, this is not appropriate. Right. This is not how we conduct ourselves. I keep thinking John McCain, I like to think that if he was still alive, he would not have turned into a Lindsey Graham, right? No. And maybe that's what kept Lindsey Graham from turning into Lindsey Graham. I don't know. But so we're an hour and 41 minutes into this. We started off with how do we stick to tabletop issues, and we ended with a discussion on masculinity. So I don't know if we're doing the party any favors here, but needless to say, it was an interesting conversation. Yeah. I was going to ask you about political texting and all that stuff, but I don't think anybody's sticking out around for that. So,
who knows? I mean, maybe that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, and I will tell you, my goal is to keep doing these podcasts. Probably not as often as I've been doing it, just because I need to keep working and I have a job. But I'll have you on, man. If you see anything coming up that you think is interesting, and you have a unique take on it, just hit me up. I'm always up to chat. And I really appreciate your point of view, man. It's super interesting and keep up with the work. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate this discussion. I think that the more that we have discussions like this, the better we are for it. I will keep pushing stuff out week after week on By the Ballot. So I hope folks can subscribe to that, and I hope that people find it interesting. Definitely, there's a lot of interesting things coming up here. One of the things I definitely will be talking about is next week I have stuff about the language issue that we were talking about earlier. I have some stuff coming up about some of the tactics that I talked about with like broadcast media and digital stuff, but then also like one of the things that I'm also focusing on is there's some interesting things going on with like some of these evangelical folks who are buying up land out in Tennessee, trying to make their own cities, like for Christian nationalists and things like that. And one of the things I definitely want to talk about is the evangelical right and how they have been influencing politics. So I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff. So I'll definitely have a lot more to say. And especially as we get closer to November, I mean, there's going to be a lot to talk about with the governor race and everything in between. So no, I appreciate, you having me on, and we can definitely talk more about that.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to put a link to your Substack in the show notes. I think, again, from a technical standpoint, you just subscribe and then you get emails or whatever. I don't know.
Listen, I made it 100% free. I don't have any paid subscribers. I don't have anything like that. I don't put anything behind a paywall. I want to just be able to put my message out there, and if folks like it, they like it. I will definitely be keeping on doing that, and the more that folks subscribe, the better. Just growing our audience is all I care about.
Yeah, and I will tell you, the focus of this podcast is really Northern Virginia and Virginia politics. So if you see something particularly that you think anybody that I'm intending to watch this stuff is interesting, Northern Virginia specific, let me know. We can get a little more wonky. I think this conversation was a bit more abstract, and again, it didn't go anywhere where I thought it would. So, but it was interesting.
Listen, I live here in Fairfax County. There's plenty of stuff going on around here that we can always talk about. So,
yeah, we got to grab a beer, man. I didn't realize you were right in Fairfax. What part of Fairfax are you in?
I'm out in Herndon.
Okay, yeah.
Right next to Dulles Airport out here, and spend quite a bit of time here in Fairfax and out in Loudoun. So I see it all. That's all I can say.
Well, I'm sure we're going to link up with probably doing some canvassing for Walkinshaw.
Absolutely.
By the way, elections coming up September 9th. Make sure to vote. Early voting started. Get your ass to the polls. And I'll bug you, Matt, soon enough. Okay, man?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me know what's going on.
Okay.